Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning, sorry. I'm moving to the end of the broadcast already. My name is Karen Egan, and I'm very pleased to be hosting the event today with Professor David Clutterbuck helping us to launch the collaboration between ILM and EMCC UK. I'm joined here today with Rita, and let me just show you who these people are. Rita Simmons from EMCC and Henry Stevenson from City and Guilds Group who are in the room with me. We've got Sarah Bell joining us by Skype and also Professor David Clutterbuck. Before we actually start with the webinar, just to explain to you that we want this to be an interactive discussion and for you to join us and ask any questions that you have along the way. So please use the chat facility. You are in listen-only mode. As we've got quite a lot of people on the webinar, it would be easier if we manage your questions through the chat. We will do our very best to answer them during the session. If we're not able to, then we'll do that in a follow-up email to you. We are recording the webinar, and we will share that with you after the end of this session. So all of the slides and the discussions will be there for you, and we'll email them to you afterwards. So if I just share with you briefly what we're looking to go through today. We're going to talk about the joint commitment that we have. We are also going to have a good 20 minutes from Professor David Clutterbuck in his insights as to what high-performing teams are. That will go nicely into a discussion around a peer coaching programme that Henry has led on within the City and Guilds Group. And then throughout, and particularly at the end, there'll be an opportunity to discuss and feed into our future plans. We do feel that we've got some ideas about how our partnership will move forward, but we exist really for your benefit. So your ideas will be very valuable to us as well. So if I can hand over to you now initially, Rita, it seems so long ago since we had that conversation at a coaching conference and thought how we could actually work more collaboratively together. So what does it mean for EMCC UK?
Thank you, Karen. From EMCC UK, we're absolutely delighted to engage in this collaboration. We do have good links with EMCC accredited providers, but that's not always been a stronger link with ILM providers. And we absolutely recognise the significant role that ILM play in terms of training coaches and mentors in the UK. And we see the ILM as a significant player in terms of developing practice. So you're right, it does feel like it's been a long time in the development, but today feels like a really significant milestone in terms of the first bit of this partnership. I mean, in the first instance, we will be offering a discounted membership to ILM learners, and that's really, to help them enhance their learning experience while they're training. But one of the things I think we all know is that when people leave their training, they're quite often left feeling quite lonely and in a place where they don't feel they have that support. So I think the really significant bit of this is using the partnership to really offer members and offer your learners the experience of becoming part of the inclusive community. I mean, EMCC is very much about developing coaching and mentoring and actually helping people on their professional pathway in the longer term. And so I think that's why we think this is so exciting in terms of the collaboration. And I think we'll be looking to the future, looking at where we can collaborate in other ways, around research, around thought leadership. But yes, as I say, feels very significant today.
And that instant support that we have within our respective leadership teams to say yes, go ahead with this. This this is really something that we want to embrace. So that was another real sort of benefit to knowing that we could move ahead with their blessing, really. So,
yes, absolutely. And at the end of the day, we have very similar aims around coaching and mentoring. You know, we are here to develop and professionalise coaching and mentoring in the UK and beyond. And you know, I think this partnership feels like you know, makes a lot of sense. So yeah, thank you, Karen. I think, can I perhaps just hand over to Sarah now and get the perspective from the ILM and City and Guilds group?
Yeah, thanks, Rita. So as many people will know, ILM's part of the City and Guilds group, and really, you know, there's a wider purpose there that this partnership supports as well. That, you know, we're really looking to help people into jobs, on the job, and then onto the next job. And coaching and mentoring is so important to that, and such a great addition and expansion of what ILM stand for. You know, we want to be the gold standard with this partnership. Coaching, rendering practice, and combining that practical application and professional competency with the rigor of, you know, regulated qualifications wrapped around that. So the two organisations working together just brings so much strength and commitment to that. And I think, you know, we really hope that it's a mark of quality for coaching and mentoring, and that we're looking at helping leaders and managers at all levels to unlock that potential that, you know, is ILM's core purpose. And also looking at, you know, bringing industry expertise around this fantastic area that's been underutilised and under kind of invested in for so long, and bringing some more kind of formal actions around it. So from our perspective, you know, our partnership, it's supporting both of our aims. So that's what's so brilliant about it. You know, there's no adjustment to be had here. We're both still looking to expand on what we're already aiming to achieve, and promoting and setting expectation of that practice, and looking at things like Karen mentioned, you know, feedback from this group around how can we bring more value to our customers and communities out there, and developing networks, ongoing CPD like this, and support for those communities, so that we're able to really, you know, meet the goals that we've just discussed as a partnership. So really exciting.
excellent.
So I'm going to hand back to Karen for
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to whiz straight over to you, David, about you know, you're one of the founding members of EMCC, and you know, very much involved with them still. What does this mean for you? What's your perspective on this?
Having worked with Henry and her colleagues in City and Guilds, I've been exposed over in recent years to a lot of the enthusiasm for coaching and mentoring, and an organisation that's really trying to make it work inside the organisation. So I think it's brilliant that we're seeing this, that this is just another step, I think, in the continuing integration of coaching and mentoring into what the organisation does. So it's an exemplar for the kind of good practice that we're trying to promote. All employers should have. So I think that it fits all very nicely. And I think as providers of accreditation, it's really important for both EMCC and ILM to collaborate. In fact, EMCC was created as an inclusive, collaborative organisation. And I think it's one of the big differences between EMCC and other professional bodies in the area is its inclusivity. So it's there to bring together a whole variety of providers, of academics, and also users of both coaching and mentoring as the two parallel, powerful ways of growing people.
Lovely, thank you, thank you. As we said, this webinar will be quite interactive, so and I guess this is just to make sure that you're all still with us and engaged with the webinar. So we have our first poll question. Is it on the screen? Yes, okay. So the question is, how valuable do you think one-to-one coaching, peer coaching or team coaching intervention is in developing high-performing teams? And you have a choice there between extremely valuable, very valuable, quite valuable, and not valuable. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds there to make your selection, and then we'll have a look.
Interesting.
I think perhaps we're already preaching to the converted here. Okay, just a couple more seconds. Okay, David, I don't think you can see the results, but
yes, I can. Yep, I can see them.
Yeah, so I'm going to hand over to you. Obviously, 97% feel that it's extremely valuable or very valuable, but we do have 3% who are perhaps feeling that it's not very valuable or quite valuable. So let's see if you can convert those 3% and talk to us now about team coaching with the Peril model.
Okay. So I'm going to rely on you to pop up my slides for me. Let's go straight into the main slide. I'm talking to you at the moment from Zagreb. I have to remember where I am because I could be anywhere in the world. But today is Zagreb, working with the EMCC branch here, and also with a whole bunch of team coaches who have just qualified through their 3 intensive modules. I think team coaching is rapidly growing. And there's lots of reasons for that. In particular, because the organisations just need to have more teamwork in order to function. And also, we're finding that just because you've got a bunch of people who are very good in their own way, who are performing highly, doesn't mean the team performs highly. So organisations are trying to increase the organisational performance by moving away from just individual performance. And I think that's one of the big trends that we see in organisations today. Looking at the whole organisation systemically and looking at performance systemically. And I think any one-to-one coach who doesn't look at things from well, you can't really help your clients in any depth if you don't look beyond what's happening inside them to what's happening in the systems around them. How the changes they want to create being reflected or being influenced by other people and the system that they're part of. So team coaching is, I think, growing very rapidly, and it's an essential skill for any organisation that wants to survive in a constantly changing world. So let's just move on to the slides and be clear about what we're meaning. It's not team building. Team building is about helping people to get on together. It's not team facilitation, because that's about solving specific issues that the team needs to deal with. It's not about strategy away days either, and it's not about coaching the members of the team individually. We do see it sometimes described as any or all of these, but it isn't any of them. It is a much more intensive activity about helping the entire work team to grow together and to perform more effectively. And that's really reflected in the next slide, where, if we can, there we go. There's 2 definitions here which I put up, which illustrate the 2 different perspectives. In the first one, it's primarily about performance using coaching principles. In the second one, it's about growth and development. And I like to put the 2 of them together as equally important in terms of what team coaching does, because effective team coaching, we now increasingly see, ends when the coach leaves. The team is better able to coach itself, and if the coach doesn't enable the team to grow so that it can coach itself more effectively, then I think the coaching has failed. So putting those 2 things together is critical. And if we look at some of in the next slides, some of the processes around performance, well, yeah, let's do the question first. Sure. Okay. Yeah. How do people see coaching, one-to-one coaching versus team coaching? What's the big difference for them? So if I open up the chat room, we might see some some interesting comments.
Yeah, if you want to type in any thoughts that you have on the question, Oh, we've got a few coming through now. Dealing with multiple diverse styles and needs.
Yeah.
Complexity, individual problems. Team coaching takes into account the system. Well, that's interesting.
Yep.
Gosh, they're all flowing in now. one size doesn't fit all, and there's a key there around collaboration, linking in with the collective goal.
I think there was an interesting point there, Karen, as well, about context.
Yes, yes, yeah. And the size of the team has an impact. Yes.
Very much. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Once you get above 8 people, a team increasingly becomes less effective.
Yes. Yes.
And it's actually claimed. I don't think we have any real empirical evidence to support it, but a lot of anecdotal evidence to support. Once you get above 12 people, every additional person detracts from the performance of the team.
Okay.
On about team coaching, helping with multi-generational teams, gets everyone together in one space, which doesn't happen enough.
Yeah.
And I guess listening to each other's perspectives on things as well will help that multi-generational aspect as well, I think. Yeah.
So the critical thing I'm taking from a lot of these comments, and the thing that comes across so clearly in working with teams, is it's so much more complex. If you think about, the relationship one-to-one coaching, there's just you, the coach, and the client. But now if you've got 8 people in the team, you've got 64 different relationships, 63 different relationships, plus the relationship between you as the coach. And it's one of the things that we now increasingly recommend is that team coaching takes place with 2 coaches. So that one is always there in front of house, and the other is always there looking and watching what's happening, because the complexities and the dynamics of the way that the team works. And what we see increasingly is that there are things which you can say one-to-one, which you would not want to say in front of the entire team. It takes an awful lot of building of psychological safety to be able to explore issues in a team context. That you could more easily explore one-to-one. And so there are lots of differences between one-to-one coaching and team coaching, but the critical thing is it is more complex. It requires a greater systems attention, and it is much more demanding than the one-to-one coaching. Let's look at some of that in the next slide. Here we go. So we've got this wonderful word performance, and nobody knows what it is. When we talk about performance, do we mean individual performance or collective performance? Who decides what performance is? Is it the members of the team themselves, or is it somebody outside the team who defines what performance looks like? The time period. When we look at organizational performance, with the annual report, is usually 6 months out of date by the time it comes. The company could be bust by the time you get the annual report. Performance is many things, and it's almost impossible to actually find a common definition of what we mean by performance. This issue of the strength of the link with the organizational purpose. Does performance actually reflect what the organization is there for? This abandonment of hospital waiting times. Performance is how long you have to wait wait to be seen in A&E. But suddenly it's been realised that that's not actually a true measure of performance of an A&E department. So let's move on to the next slide. So performance we can't really easily define. And the best we can come is to look at performance being about improvements in how the team functions and how it functions now. But alongside performance, we have to look at capability. So how is that team building its ability to function in the future? And I'm grateful to Peter Hawkins, my colleague, for redefining capacity for us. Capacity is how you perform better with more with less. And those 3 things, if we think not just about performance, capability, and capacity, That's what team coaching is there to deliver. And then moving to the next slide, if we there we go. One of the earliest writers on teams and high-performing teams was John Katzenbach, and his 6 key areas. These are the things that he and his team found underpinned all the high-performing teams they looked at. So it's got to be a proper team. You know, it's you know who's in it. And he found stable, and I think we would argue about with some of the more recent research. A team may actually have, we do find teams with different membership or evolving membership being high performing as well. They've got to know where they're going. What are we here for? What does our purpose look like? You've got to have the people in it who have the right qualification, the right competencies, and the right ability to work, and that includes the ability to work together. It's got to have a proper structure. You know what you're there for. You've got proper norms of working. You're a size that makes sense. This supportive organizational context. If you're operating in a hostile environment and nobody's giving you the resources to do the job that you're supposed to do, you cannot be high performing. But then this 6th one, I think is fascinating, having competent team coaching. And what subsequent research by John and by Ruth Hageman and others has found is that team coaching is the critical variable. And by team coaching means coaching out from outside and coaching within the team of each other's members. Taking a concrete style is a critical factor in the performance of teams. And if we go on to another definition, the next slide. This guy, a wonderful name, Shampoo. I never knew it was supposed to be spelt that. But he found these 5 characteristics of high-performing teams. So this high level of trust, the high level of respect, having this common purpose that comes across all the time, the willingness and ability to manage conflict. And one of the things that we find within teams is not an absence of conflict, it's the management of conflict. And actually, in many cases, team coaching increases the amount of positive conflict that happens within the team. So conflict of ideas is really helpful, whereas conflict of relationships is not. And so helping the team actually create the environment where conflict can be a driver of performance, not a drag on performance. Focus on results he found, and the alignment of authority and accountability. So we know everybody knows what everybody is supposed to do and accepts their role in making the team perform. And then let's move to the next slide. This is a study that I did a few years ago, looking at the highest performing teams in a high-tech company. And we did loads of focus groups within this organization. And these 8 characteristics, in no particular order, were common to all of them. Now, that does not mean that if you create all these characteristics in another team, that necessarily guarantees that team will become high performing. These characteristics may, and in fact we're quite sure some of them are, actually they're descriptors of a team that is already high performing, so they may be results of being high performing, not the predicators of being high performing. However, if we look at it, hiring the right people, in this particular organization, they spent inordinate amount of time making sure they had the right person to join the team. And I loved one of the questions that they would ask when you were interviewing. Team members would interview any new member. One of the questions that would be asked was, would you be happy having this person sit opposite you 8 hours a day every week? I think it's a brilliant question. And one of the other critical questions is, what can this person bring to our team that would be really valuable that we don't have right now? And this kind of thinking about who's going to be the right person. Focusing on success too. They're not constantly looking at people's weaknesses. There's a very strong emphasis on the positive. And we found that the recovery period from setbacks was very, very short. In unsuccessful teams, we often find it's months, sometimes years. We're talking about hours and days at most here. Using people's strengths is fairly obvious. Trust and respect, obvious too. People welcome change. They look forward to it and saw the role of stimulating change, not getting in the way. Clear goals are obvious too. And I love fizz and buzz. Fizz is the enjoyment that you get from the work that you do. And buzz is the enjoyment you get from the company that you keep at work. And these teams all had very high levels of both fizz and buzz. And then the secure leader, the leader who doesn't feel they have to manage anybody, but create the environment where people can manage themselves. And that's so there are some real factors. And these were the 8 key things that we found consistently in all the highest performing teams in this organization. There are many other studies on high performance, but these are just some of the illustrative ones. There is no clear consensus. And part of team coaching is helping the team define what high performance means in its context, on its terms. Let's look at the next slide. So if we think about coaching, coaching is a conversation that links the internal worlds of a person or a team with the external world. And if we understand, if we understand our internal world better, the dynamics of a team that shape the way the team behaves, and the external world, the forces acting upon us, the systems around us, then we can have a better conversation that links the two. And coaching is basically that conversation that helps us make better choices, develop better systems that link the internal and external world. Let's look at the next slide. What we also see is a lot of the stuff about performance is about non-performance. Many of you will have seen Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's really not very credible. It doesn't have all of the things that might affect a team. It just has a sample. It doesn't have, in the sense, and the idea that lack of trust leads to this, leads to that, leads to that, lack of accountability, and so forth. Actually, in many cases, it's the other way round. And so really looking at deficit models doesn't really help. So what's needed is from what we found in our research, was a way of looking at both the positive and the negative. So what makes teams highly functional and what makes teams highly dysfunctional, and looking at the interaction between the two things. And we found no real literature that enabled us to do that. So let's look at the next slide. Most of the approaches that we've seen in terms of describing team performance are very linear. When we see things that are linear, they look at the symptoms, they don't look at what's underlying, they don't look at them from a systemic point of view. Linear approaches are often address the obvious problems rather than the deeper, more complex problems. They look at short-term gains rather than what are you trying to achieve over the very long term. Very often, if you take a linear approach, whether it's in HR or any other system, you get negative effects or negative consequences, but you haven't predicted those because you're not looking at the complexity of the system as a whole. And because of all of those things, if something goes wrong within a linear system, everybody puts the blame on everybody else. It must be to do with something else. And I think that's what we're seeing with most of the models of team performance that we looked at. And there are a lot of them out there in the literature. So let's look at the next slide. So what we did was to do a very deep analysis of hundreds of articles and books, looking at what did people say, what underpinned team performance. And I'm not going to read all these things through because we'll get the slides anyway, but you can see that there's a number of things here that recur time and time again. And some of these echo the things in the Katzenberg and Shampoo analyses. One that's not in either of those analyses is requisite diversity. There is diversity within a team can be highly empowering, or it can get in the way. So when in the most effective teams, the research shows that if your team is highly diverse, you're likely to have more conflict. But if it's highly homogeneous, you don't get much conflict at all, and you get too little conflict. And what turns out to be the most effective kind of team is a team that has a high degree of diversity, but very good norms about how you use that to positive effect. How you value the diversity and actually encourage the positive conflict. So what we did was to explore all of these things and try to understand how do they all fit together in a systemic way. And that, if we look at the next slide, we found that they all came together in quite a simple way. So what we've got here is 5 critical elements. Purpose and motivation. What is the team here for? And does that purpose that it has, the reason it's there, does it motivate people? Or does it bore the heck out of them? You know, do people actually look forward to coming to work? The external processes. How do you relate to, what reputation do you have with them? How do you listen to your stakeholders? And then the relationships between the members of the team. One of the lovely questions I like to ask when I'm doing an initial foray into a team is, if you were starting this team from scratch, would you hire all the same people that you have now? That tells you so much about that team. And then the internal processes, how you make decisions, for example. When we ask most teams, how do you make decisions? They can't tell us. It sort of just happens. So what's the process? What are the quality processes in the team too? How does the team learn? And the critical question there for me is, how do you as a team make sure that you are changing and evolving in line with, or at least in line with, if not ahead of the changes that are happening around you? So again, we're doing a systemic approach here. And finally, the leadership issues. Now, I'm specifically talking about leadership, not the leader. Because the idea, the sense of the heroic leader is something that we're increasingly finding is not available in the organisation. Indeed, we did some research. I've been searching for months for a credible paper on what are the functions of leadership. Eventually, after months, we found one that had 15 well-evidenced functions of leadership. And what we've been doing with teams around the world is actually saying to them, okay, how many of these functions need to be invested in a single individual, the leader, the authority figure, and how many of them can actually be distributed in part or in whole amongst the team? And fascinatingly, we found there is very, very little that cannot be shared out to a significant degree across the team. So leadership is the way the team itself exercises control and management of itself and its tasks. Even one of the characteristics that was in this analysis was actually setting up the team, deciding who should be in it. But the example of the high-performing team that I gave earlier, it's the members of the team that can actually take a very strong role in deciding who should join them. So we couldn't find any one of these single functions of the team that could not be distributed in some way. So let's look at the next slide, which is nice and simple.
David, before you carry on, I think we had a bit of a wobble with the connection, just for a second, and we have a question. We lost what David said about heroic leaders. Does he like it or dismiss it?
Right. Yes. There's a role for the heroic leader. Sometimes you need a hero, but most of the time you basically, if you are the heroic leader, you take away the courage from everybody else. And basically what's needed is to actually devolve as much more of the responsibility for what happens in the team and for leadership to the team itself. There are always times when somebody's got to take charge on behalf of the team, but there's a lot more times when business as usual, then we don't need heroes, we need people who can engage others.
I like that. It takes away the courage of others. Excellent, thank you.
Okay, let's look at the next slide. As you can see, it's nice and simple. What we're looking at here is the first truly systemic model of team performance. And the LQB is leadership qualities and behaviors, that's down the middle. And everything in green is a positive interaction between one of those 5 pillars and another one. a positive sense of purpose.
David, sorry, we lost you there for a second. Just as you were launching into the model, so
okay.
Very sorry, could you just recap from the beginning?
Yeah. So the leadership qualities and behaviours, it's the LQB in the middle. But what we've got here is basically a systemic model of what happens. So everything interacts with everything else. Now, in the only way we can present this in 2 dimensions, obviously, is two dimensions of what is a 5-dimensional model, because everything interacts with everything else. But if you take the example of having very positive sense of motivation and purpose within the team, but you don't listen to your stakeholders, for example, that has a negative outcome on the team's performance because you don't get the support from your stakeholders for what you're trying to do. And you may have a negative reputation with them as well, which will damage your ability to get resources and so forth. So every one of these things has the potential to react positively or negatively with the others. And what we're finding is that when teams analyze what they do in each of these columns and look at one against the other, they can very quickly identify the priorities for them in making change happen in the way that they function. Now, I hope that makes sense, because it's when we're starting to talk systems, we start to talk complexity. So let's just roll on, and we can come back to this if anybody wants to in a while.
Well, we have a question to ask at this point, David.
Go for it.
Your point exactly. Does this make sense for you? So let's just hear from you. Does that make sense? Absolutely. Was the first one that came through. I'm with you there, Gail.
Karen, is it worth just asking David the question about LQB and what it is?
Yes. I think David recapped on that. So
leadership qualities.
Yeah.
And behaviours.
Leadership qualities and behaviours. Yeah. Of course. Good to me. No one's disagreeing with you yet, David.
We've got an I'm not sure, need to mull this one over.
It's starting to. Reward is also a key factor, I think. Interesting.
Sorry, I missed what the word was. Something was a key factor?
Reward.
Reward. Yeah, that would be part of the motivation. It would also be part of the internal systems.
Yeah. Good to see the negative and the positive and how they come across. What do the yellow areas mean?
That's the leadership qualities and behaviours, I think.
Yeah. I think that's just where they collide with their own pillar in terms of the.
And essentially, the leadership qualities and behaviours, that's the intervening variable that influences all the others.
Yeah, it's in a simplistic form, but it is much deeper. Yeah. Oh, how do we turn the wannabe hero into a team player? I think that's a whole new webinar, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's a coaching conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Right. Someone wants to see the table again. Have we got time to just go back to that?
I'm sure. In reality, we could stop the presentation at that point, and just throw it open for people's discussion, if you like, and for Henry to come in with some comments on this, because I'm looking at the clock.
Yeah. Okay. If you're happy to do that.
Yeah, that's fine. It's basically what I wanted to do was demonstrate how we came to the model. Just to throw it open, it's now being used by teams to try and identify where they are and what they want to focus on improving. Well, Henry, did you want to come in at this point?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, David. I wanted to share an example of a programme that we've been doing in the City and Guilds group, and it's really interesting to understand a bit more about your model, David, because as I look at the green areas, I'm reflecting on how I've seen so much of that through the programme that we've been doing, which is giving me a lot of security, and it really kind of backs up actually what we're seeing in reality in terms of the benefits and outcomes that are coming from this peer coaching programme. Should we jump to a couple of slides that I can do, and then we can open up to questions to everybody on David's model, but also a little bit about the programme that we've been doing. And I think they interconnect quite well, although this has been a broader programme as opposed to very sort of team-led, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Essentially, I think I'm absolutely preaching to the converted in that we know that coaching is something that can really help and support people through change. And there's some research done recently by ILM that said 76% of respondents agreed with that statement. And I think also the one thing we all know is that every organisation at the moment is going through change and will continue to go through change. It is the new normal, and it is constant. And at the City and Guilds group, we're no different. And last year we wanted to introduce a programme, a peer coaching programme, specifically to support people through change and to help build a culture of continuous improvement and high performance. And we did that as we were going through a specific change programme, which involved new ways of working, a new target operating model, new line management, lots of different things, and unfortunately it did also include some voluntary redundancies, so that we knew that there was going to be a specific change programme that people needed support about. But also, as I said, this programme was about the longer term change and the changes that we needed to see in our culture. So it was very clear that we wanted to have a programme that was going to be sustainable and have real reach and really build more of a coaching culture. So in essence, what we did was we trained up 30 peer coaches. They did a 3-day training program, and those peer coaches were asked to run peer groups across our business. And that was opened up to anybody to join a peer group. They had to commit to attending 3 peer group coaching sessions. And those groups were mixed teams, mixed levels, mixed functions, mixed locations. So this was really about trying to get more connection and collaboration across this area of the business, and then remove some of the silos as a result. And we absolutely know, and as you've seen from some of what Dave has just shared, is that coaching is one of the best ways of building personal and individual responsibility and empowering people to take ownership of change. And that, for me, as you were talking, David, about leadership and everybody having this leadership responsibility, that is about kind of taking action and ownership and control and being part of change in a positive way as much as possible. So that was really kind of what we were aiming to achieve. And there were some key elements to this program which I think certainly made it different for us. And I think hopefully as I talk you through, it may also be a reflection of how it can work in different organisations. So the first element really was that it was absolutely all inclusive. Often we see coaching and investment for coaching happening at a senior level, at a line manager leadership, leaders as a coach, or talent programs. What we wanted to do was to open this up to everybody within the organisation. So anybody could apply to be a peer coach. We had members of our exec team applying as a peer coach, and we had people right on the front line being peer coaches. And once they came into the training, there was no hierarchy. Whatever role you do in the organisation, that was removed. Everybody was being trained up as a peer coach. We were also adamant about kind of role modelling the culture that we want to see in the organisation, and that was about co-creating things and getting people's ideas and engagement through it. So this wasn't about me having an absolutely set plan of what this programme was going to look like. I certainly had a vision around it and ideas about what I thought could work. But what we did with our peer coaches was we really got them involved in shaping the programme, and that's continuing. And I think as part of that Croatian, building on again on what you said, David, we've had an absolute emphasis on the positive. And even though people were having to deal with very challenging things within the change programme, our peer coaches were really sort of focusing, obviously acknowledging where people were at, but really helping people move forward and think about what the opportunities were for them during change. We introduced digital badges, which is one of the key products and services that we offer within the City and Guilds group, and that was providing additional credibility, so you could see what our peer coaches had actually been trained in, the competencies they have. They got a badge once they've been trained, and they had a badge once they've done 3 sessions, which we were observing, and we've asked them to be part of group supervision along the way. And we built a community by using an innovative app with our peer coaches, so that they could continue to learn together. And I think that was another key part of your model, David, was about the learning processes. And what we ended up doing was creating a high-performing team with these peer coaches. But also what was kind of most important in terms of the impact that the programme has had for people that were actually joining the peer groups was that it's really helped move people through the change curve. And we've seen people get to grips with change more quickly. We've seen people feeling empowered to actually take control. I've seen examples of people coming into a session where they feel absolutely stuck and very, very low about how they were feeling about the change, and within 2 hours feeling a sense of community from their other peer group participants that they were with, knowing that they're not alone in things, connecting with other peers, and really shifting mindsets. So that person after 2 hours had a completely different viewpoint, which is what we see in our one-to-one coaching. But what we've been able to do is spread that across the organisation. And I always sort of wonder, how long would that person have been stuck sitting at their desk? Possibly days, actually. So this was also about developing multi-level coaching skills. So not only were the peer coaches role modelling coaching skills, everybody within a peer group was encouraged to listen, to question, to not jump to solutions, and build their coaching skills, as well as get a lot of benefits in terms of working through their own challenges and opportunities. We've actually did around 28 hours of training in total, and we've provided supervision along the way. We've had over 80 coaching hours now take place, and we've had over 100 people involved in this programme. So the ripple effect and the scale of it has been something that we're proud of, and actually we're now looking at kind of how we grow that even more. So again, building on what you said, David, I think some of the areas around building trust, certainly for people within the peer groups, being able to have a supportive group, we've seen that. We've seen respect amongst each other. And actually 100% of people that have been involved in the programme have said they would recommend it to other people in the organisation. So it feels like we tapped into something. But I think it just shows the positive impact that coaching can have, and how you can scale it within an organisation so that more people feel the benefit. So there's lots more I could say about it. I could probably talk all day, but would love to open up to questions based on what you've heard from David, and also any questions on what we've been doing here in the City and Guilds group.
Thanks, Henry. And as a peer coach myself, I was one of the 30. Echo everything that Henry said. It was a really enlightening experience, particularly where people were going through significant change. So can't wait to hear what the next step is for us. So we've got about 12 minutes left. So we have our final poll question. Same question that we started with. Have we 3%? Have we converted the 3%? So it would appear that we have.
Oh, don't speak too soon.
Oh no, we've still got. I think we've got most of the answers in. Okay, we're up to 98%, so that's a shift of 1%. So
it's a shift.
It's a shift. We'll take that. We'll take that. Okay. So we just have a few minutes left for any questions that you want to put to any of the panel that are here? Just checking these through now. So we have a question: were the peer coaches trained already? And the second question: was the peer coaching done in teams or one-to-one?
No, well, actually, we had some of our peer coaches that applied had previous coaching experience and were qualified coaches through ILM. And the peer coaching was done in small groups, so there were around 3 to 4 people in each of the peer groups. They weren't teams necessarily in the kind of traditional sense, but as we know in all organisations now, we're breaking down those barriers, and there's much more around sort of multiple teams. We have, matrix working and people accountable in different areas. So teams in a kind of broad sense, but not in the kind of typical sense, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And there was a question earlier about were you just preaching to the converted? Did you just coach to people who were already receptive to that? I'm paraphrasing it because I can't see the question anymore. But
in terms of the peer coaches,
yes, yeah.
I think all of the peer coaches had an interest in coaching, and that was part of the interview process that they went through. But I think what was interesting about this is that the people that are actually attending the peer groups were coming to this cold. So they weren't, often you see group coaching happen on the basis of a development program. So people spend 2 days on a training program and then they have some group sessions to help embed the learning. What we were doing was inviting people to just come along. So they were taking a bit of a leap of faith. We had lots of people saying, I don't really see what benefit I'm going to get from this. I don't really know anything about coaching. It's their first experience of coaching. And the feedback from those people has been it's opened their eyes to coaching and to listening more to people and questioning and all of the good stuff that we know about.
Yeah, and certainly my experience, I've got people coming along who were in a very negative place when they arrived because they didn't know what the future held for them, and saw it initially as somewhere to just have a moan. And we certainly gave them that space, but then had the coaching conversation, and 100% have recommended it. So obviously that was a positive experience.
I think the other thing was that it also supported people that were actually leaving the organisation. So that's a challenging place to be. But actually we were able to provide that extra bit of support for those people, which I think is something that a lot of organisations look to do and want to do. So it provided a new way of doing that.
Okay. A question for David, I think. In what way can you use the peril model developmentally? Are the dimensions prioritised in any way? The model looks useful as a means of describing the current situation, but does it help with what next?
Okay, lovely question. The answer is yes, you can use it developmentally because by identifying the issues that you want to work on and giving priority to those, then you can get a picture of where you are in each of those, and then you can go back to them in whatever time, 6 months later, a year later, and say, okay, are those still an issue, and what progress have we made against them? So part of the project is getting some measures that will tell you, are we making progress on the issues that you've identified?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, David. We also have a question around the collaboration between ILM and EMCC. Will it mean that EMCC approve the ILM?
Well, we do approve of the ILM. I think that's a really good question, because I think what we need to do is separate membership from accreditation, and I think David and I, both sort of reinforce this message that the EMCC is a very inclusive organisation, and we want people to join at all points in their coaching and mentoring journey. Accreditation is actually managed by international. My colleague Denise Whitworth is the vice president there at International, and she's already mapped ILM qualifications across to the EMCC accreditation. And in many cases, you know, ILM qualification does allow you to do the individual accreditation of EMCC on a fast track, what's called a fast track process. So we have connected the two. In terms of the membership categories, they are self-selected. You know, we've deliberately taken a view that we're not going to police how people self-select their categories. So, you know, to some extent on our website, when you join, and, you know, obviously we encourage you to join and to take advantage of the discounted offer, you know, we do give some guidance, but, you know, that's not an accreditation process, and it's really very much for you to self-select where you think you are on your journey. Hopefully that makes sense.
Can I add to that? We are this year launching a number of new accreditations, which hopefully will be able that will form some new basis for collaboration with ILM as well. So one of them is for mentoring and coaching program managers, so people in organisations responsible for managing mentoring and coaching, and that's a growing role. Another one is for HR as champions of coaching and mentoring in the organisation. So it's what do HR people need to know about coaching and mentoring in order to facilitate a whole range of things. For example, the hiring in of executive coaching services or supervision. So qualification there, and we are in the process of developing a set of professional standards for team coaches as well. So those are all things that I'm sure we'll have interesting conversations with about, you know, how we collaborate more deeply with ILM in due course within some or all of those.
Thank you, David. We've had a plea from someone to say, could we please hear from the few that are present who are not yet convinced? so we'll scroll down and see if any of them have a question for us. Let's have a look. Yeah, keep going. So there's an ILM centre. Is this something we can embrace sooner rather than later? Absolutely. There is communication that's out there. Sarah, is there anything that you've got in the pipeline for communication? Sorry, I've leapt on you there a bit.
Well, we're continuing to get the key messages out there and make sure that, you know, the website's updated and that everything that's going out around both the partnership but also the supported offers. So absolutely all ILM centres will be hearing about the partnership, but also the set of products to support this on both sides. So yes, there will be updates to centres directly, and also through lovely people like Karen, who'll be out seeing you all the time anyway, and then also just updates on social media. But please do engage with it, because actually what we want to do is we want to make sure that this partnership is working for our customers. So please do feedback and do engage and do sign up to the newsletters. So we'll make sure that maybe when we finish the webinar, we get that out to everyone on the call, Karen.
Yes, definitely. And that we've got a question about how do we become an EMCC member. We'll cover that as well in that information. We have a question around how does supervision fit with peer coaches?
So this was about continuing the development of our peer coaches, because, you know, we were asking them to do quite a lot actually, to go and run group coaching sessions, and some of them hadn't had a huge amount of coaching experience, and they had a 3-day training program. So really it was to give them the space to talk through any challenges that they were having within the groups that they were running, to learn more skills and do all of the good stuff that we see within supervision. But it was really about us continuing their development, and ensuring that we were also getting a feel for some of the themes that were coming through from the groups, and getting an understanding of whether things were making a difference or not.
Okay. All right, I think we're just about on time. So I think we've still got quite a few questions that are coming through, but we've spread them across the sort of 3 main areas that we've covered this morning. We will do our very best to answer the questions that have come through and share those with you after the webinar. As we said right at the beginning, we will be recording this and sharing that with you as soon as we're able to. So can I just say thank you very much. Thank you to Rita, Henry, Sarah and David, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.